Maribo usso.
That aura about you. You're a vampire!
And what of it? Will you murder me for that alone?
This is gonna be a bit of a doozy. Come closer, child. What ails you? I see. Not again. You know, just because you like a genre doesn't mean you have to play all of the games. You should go out and explore other genres. I promise, there's stuff out there that will blow your mind. Not to mention, not all of them are flawless masterpieces that you need to play. Oh yeah, there's things to say about this game. There's things to say about the genre in general, but I'll stay focused on the topic for now. Developed by small Spanish studio The Game Kitchen and published in 2019 by Team 17, Blasphemous is a Souls-like Metroidvania hybrid, if one were to forget that Souls-likes are already technically 3D Metroidvania games to begin with. You play as Pyramid Head's long-lost brother, Conehead. You wake up from arguably the best or worst orgy to have ever happened, depending on one's preferences. You get a nice intro boss fight that's a massive lie because I beat it on the first try without taking any damage. And then you're released into a grimdark, lonely, and dying world based on the Spanish interpretation of the gospel, where everyone is either mad, going mad, or so sane that they're essentially mad. Your bonfires are the pre-dews, your health is sin, your estus is bile, which I'll have plenty to share around by the end. Your souls are the tears the players will shed while playing, and when you die you get to keep them? 0 out of 10. Unplayable. Thanks for watching, guys. But enough summarizing, let's get into it properly, and how better to structure a review of a Spanish game overflowing with religious culture than with an Italian spaghetti western. This time around, we're in artsy indie game territory, so we're obviously dealing with some extremely detailed pixel art that was probably harder to make than proper 3D assets. I know that I say this a lot, but it's the truth. The game looks phenomenal from beginning to end, and I genuinely can't remember one single thing that might have looked out of place. Out of place as in worse for quality. Get that monstrosity off my screen. Yeah, unlike most recent indies, recent in fossil terms, this is as far from cutesy as you can get. Blasphemous' story is about penance, and we're not talking pussy neo-Catholic, sit in a corner until you've reflected on your actions, or don't eat the next morning and come in for confession. No, we're talking real punishment. Always the memester, the god of this universe, decided that symbolic punishment might be missing the point a little bit, so why not try the real deal for a time? Trial period. As you're walking around, most of the enemies are just that, victims of their metaphoric punishment made manifest. Some of these are quite gruesome. They're fucking great. I love the imagery in this game. It doesn't pull any punches. All these people are truly suffering, and you can also help them on their way. The executions work as catharsis after killing a particularly infuriatingly cringe enemy, but it also makes you animation immune while you perform it, and gives you more fervor, which is your mana. But somehow, I still can't get over the notion that I'm basically doing these guys a service. They want to get punished. Can't even have this much in this game. I also have to mention the cutscenes. While not that many, they are sprinkled around when interacting with new mechanics or when you reach certain checkpoints. These are also great. They kinda remind me of heavy metal. As for the locations, this is usually the breaking point of most of these cohesive, all-in-one worlds common in Metroidvanias, but even that is really well made. I never noticed a stark difference between consecutive areas. They make sense and flow into each other naturally, both architecturally and geographically. The mountaintop is gonna be cold and windy, while the bottom of fucking hell is gonna have some spikes and gas. It works. It's a dying world, and you notice. All these come in contrast to the insides of these places of prayer, where Albedo and the population centers you can see outside are decaying and mostly lifeless, aside from the sinners. When you get inside, you can see where all the donations went. Yeah, God really needed that giant censer made of gold. This plays a bit into some of the themes of the game, one of which is straight-up skepticism towards the divine, but more on that later. The last thing I want to touch on is the music, and my only complaint that I could possibly have in this section. This is the most metal fucking game I've played in a while. We're talking badass silent synth-slayer protagonists, heavy religious imagery, gore, tits. What else is missing? And you do get some guitar-y tracks, but not enough. It's never enough. This is where I'd recommend you play your own Wandering playlist to compensate, but I can't. Because the music they did put in is also really good. It's an indie artsy game through and through, and they put in the legwork. The game looks and sounds amazing. It really pulls you into this morbid universe, and very rarely does this particular aspect suspend your disbelief. I mean, look at this, man. Fucking amazing. Uh-oh. Well, here we go. Oh no. It's nice, really, after all these first-person and third-person shooters, to just sit back and relax on the couch with a controller. What was that? You play shooters with a controller? Well, I mean, I can't help you. I'm not a psychologist, but I know someone that can. There is a problem, though. Since this is a certified Unity game, when you die, the game kinda forgets about your controller, so you need to press a keyboard key to get over it. So yeah, the couch is nice, but you better have your keyboard with you as well. The game kills you so hard, your controller dies in real life. I'm kinda like that dad in kids' movies, getting the kid to help give him tools to fix his car, and the kid can't tell the difference between a 6 and a 9. So the dad goes on a mega rant, blaming society, the cosmos, and his wife for all the world's ills, cursing the very soil he was born on. But then the engine starts and he goes from 100 to 0. That's me with Souls games. I get so angry at some of these fucking mechanics, man. But then, for some reason, I always come back because I just need to see every nook and cranny of these things. I usually like the worlds and the themes, the art direction and the combat mechanics to some extent, but then I can take or leave the bad hitboxes, the roided up bosses on a sugar rush, and some issues I have with the stories that I'll talk about later. But that's my confession out of the way. Now it's time for yours, Blasphemous, you naughty little bitch. You call this modern gameplay? Getting knocked into pits when you get hit? The fuck is this, 1980? Enemies' bodies as hitboxes? You even have a fucking power-up making them hurt less? You knew about this and you kept it in? This Ninja Gaiden enemy placement bullshit? Oh, you're really fucking asking for it. Oh yeah, if you think this is a flawless masterpiece, it's gonna get really rough in here. Don't you fucking dare. I have the receipts. I'll call you a clown. For all this talk of Souls-likes and gritting your teeth and clenching your ass cheeks, this game sure is easy. I beat all of the bosses, except for the last one, without using any upgrades other than the first few you get. No flasks either. I didn't even figure out how to unlock the other slots or better flasks by the end of my first playthrough, and for good reason. I'll get the praise out of the way first. The combat animations and the prayers all look great, very visceral and weighty. When you can actually wail on an enemy and keep him down, it's extremely satisfying. Everything to do with this game's presentation is amazing though, you knew that already. The problem is the quote-unquote difficulty, and it is difficult, just for all the wrong reasons, like... When I said that first boss fight is a lie, I meant it. This ain't no combat-oriented boss rush. This is an old-school NES game, from top to bottom. We have Castlevania style getting knocked back when you get hit, and they don't exactly try to hide how much they hate you. Ninja Gaiden enemy placement? Oh yes, you wanna get on that ledge? You wanna get there? Huh? You wanna get there? Well, you can't. Don't forget about the always classic, you throwing pit scan projectiles while you're on a moving platform. It relies on tedium and preys on your boredom. This again is highlighted by... Except for this one guy, I know how to and have been able to no-hit all of these other bosses. I know their patterns, I know what I can jump, what I can dash, and what I can parry reliably. The problem is just how often they allow you to do it. This is my favorite fight, because you have to keep focused the entire time. Still, there's bizarre reactions if you don't punish the right thing. And probably half of the time, after you get her past half HP, she's immune to damage. This one boss is literally immune to damage for more than half of the fight, and when you can damage him, there's random platforms that might not allow you to. They also rely on some stupid tropes. If you're gonna chain hit me 3 times after I got hit by the first, then just take all that health in the first hit and let me go on with my day. If you're gonna give me a skill-based parry button that I have to master anyway, make it work. The controls in general just feel very slow and clunky. Sometimes you can dash or parry mid-animation, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can dash through an enemy, sometimes it's a wide wall. Can't dash through, not enough room to dodge, the boss doesn't move. It's less about skill and more about knowing when your window is open and being patient, but then they ruin even that with the Unity jank. I know it says 60 FPS in the top right corner, but it sure doesn't fucking feel like it. Unity just can't handle so many particles at the same time. You could solve this issue with more tools or a change of playstyle, but the problem is that first of all, your trusty sword, oops, my fault, is the only weapon you get in this. You can upgrade its damage and give it some abilities like a dash attack and a ranged attack, but that's it. The core combat doesn't change much. What else? Anal beads, prayers, and hearts. Beads are passive perks. Most of them are raw minor stat upgrades. They say a lot on them, but you only need to read the fine print. They should act as your build, but instead they're just kind of weak, boring, and unnecessary. Oh boy, more defense. That sure is gonna be great. Prayers are your spells, you cast them using fervor, and you build that up by killing enemies or executing them. They can be useful for clearing floors or grabbing some out-of-reach babies in a bottle, but in boss fights they're mostly unnecessary, if not unusable. It's also where the death penalty comes in. In most games like this, you usually lose your currency when you die twice in a row. Here, they just lock your mana bar. Snororama. There's certain places where you can just get all of them for a pittance, and you get them all when you beat a boss anyway. I use them as markers on the map, and you can also cheese the mana by dying right before going into a boss room after it kills you, so you get 2. This fills up the rest of your mana bar. Let's talk about that Metroidvania tag. To qualify for this tag, you need 2 things. Non-linear progression and being gated by various power-ups from certain areas. And while Blasphemous gets the first one in spades, at least in the beginning, the second one is almost non-existent. There are relics in the game that technically and somewhat practically serve this purpose by showing you new platforms that you can jump or wall climb, making you immune to the toxic gas in certain areas, allowing you to jump between levels, etc. But here's the kicker. In my first blind playthrough, the only one of these powers that I found was the immunity to gas one, and quite frankly, I'm not even sure that one was necessary either. You can platform yourself to pretty much anywhere you need to see all of the story bosses and beat the game. The only necessary items you need to progress are dropped by the first 3 major bosses, and they act as keys to unlock the latter half of the game. This isn't necessarily a problem. Dark Souls and games like that, with cohesive worlds, are already technically Metroidvanias, just third person and 3D, and it is more of their thing to have to beat certain bosses to ring certain bells to open this door in a sewer or whatever. So let's talk a bit more about the exploration, because it's a major issue that affects the next section as well. Let's say you're going for the true ending, because that actually requires you to find all of the traversal relics. While in most Metroidvania games, finding a traversal tool means you never have to think about it again, and you can just do it innately, and a lot of the time it helps with the combat as well. Here, it's mostly the world changing around you once you have the relics, so how's that a bad thing? You can only equip 3 at a time. Now, it's not the ultimate exercise in tedium. Unlike your, my bad, power-ups, you can unequip and re-equip relics at your leisure, but why? Why do I have to sit here in front of a secret that I know is there and have to go into the menu to find the perfect relic? What does it add to the game? There is a world where these could only be switched at altars, in which case the game would have to learn to fly really fast, but here it's just, what were they thinking? It gets worse. There's a relic that allows you to hear the final words of dead bodies. These are necessary for an achievement and piecing together more of the plot. Usually this is the relic you have to slot out because it doesn't help with traversal. But those corpses can blend into the background really well, and if you don't have the relic equipped, they don't have the blue stink on them either. You can legit walk past one and never notice until later when you don't have that last puzzle piece, but the corpses aren't tracked either, so good luck going back and checking each and every one of them over again, some of which need the other relics to get to. Backtracking is a major feature of Metroidvania-style games and is required. When you find a new power, you want to go back and check that ledge you remember, or that hole that you couldn't stomp on. It's part of the experience. You also get to feel really powerful beating on the weaklings that gave you so much shit before, now that you are so much stronger, or maybe you don't even have to. You can just jump over them now. You have shortcuts that you can use to bypass everything. You can be anywhere really fast after a point, and it makes you feel really powerful. Well, you don't get any of that in this. You do get shortcuts, and don't get me wrong, they are really useful, but here's one typical room in Blasphemous. If you're uber powered up, you can kill this guy in one combo, but you can only attack him from the back. How about this big dude, spitting fireballs? You can't one-shot that even with everything unlocked. You can't jump over him either, and he spits fireballs that knock you back. This is the problem. Even when you're strong, the enemies still require you to keep your head on a swivel. You can't just beeline back to a location to find the stuff you missed. Fighting some of these enemies will still be an ordeal the 2nd, 10th, and 50th time. It can take upwards of half a minute, or even 1 or 2 to get through one of these rooms in certain areas. I've been here 100 times. I know what I have to do. I know where I want to go. Why is it so slow? You're pretty much relying on the portals to get to new areas, but they come with the same issue. You are here, the portal is here, and from there you need to go through these to get to your goal. Even if a quarter of those rooms are this, you're still looking at 5 minutes to get to somewhere you've already been, with full patience and concentration so you don't die. Oh, the miracle fucking help you if you die. This is the last bonfire you clicked on. You don't want to click on them too much either, because then the enemies respawn and you have to fight them again, so better make that jump first time. I think you get the idea. You can boil this entire section down to a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of Dark Souls difficulty. There's only so much getting good you can do when the challenge is not falling asleep, or not having the right tools to deal with certain situations. It's less about reflexes and more about itemization, memorization, and patience. You just gotta sit there until the boss does that one attack you know is 100% punishable. Boring. Throw me a bone here, Dark Souls, or at least bundle Subway Surfers Deluxe so I have something to do in the meantime. I've filed the plot, if you can even call it that, under U for ugly, not because of the contents of it, the symbolism, or how interesting it ends up being, but simply for the way it's made available to the player.
The bones speak to us.
The story in Souls-like games in general is obtuse, cryptic, pretentious, has elements pulled out of the author's ass, and is heavily dependent on the human brain's tendency to formulate patterns in everything. Me and a lot of other people aren't here to play a difficult video game and then also sit for 20 hours reading the flavor text on the items, hoping the next one will be tied in any way to the ones before. This aspect in itself isn't a bad thing. To some, that's where the fun lies. Putting that tinfoil hat on and connecting the dots with red string on a pinboard. I totally get it, but those lore channels aren't popular for no reason. People would rather sit through a series of 3-hour videos than piece together the plot for themselves, and that has to be an inconvenience, at least in some regards. As a wise man once said, it's the equivalent of finding a bunch of random notes and going to yourself, damn, that book was wild. Wait, you mean you didn't read all of the sticky notes taped to these random bones? Casual. Again, this is standard in this genre, but Blasphemous goes that extra step towards insanity. As we've established before, backtracking is tedious. The enemies take 100 hits to kill sometimes, and the placement of the enemies means you can't be complacent. Imagine backtracking through this, looking for items to assemble the fucking plot. It's madness. But I like being thorough, so I did. I used a guide though, sue me. Got every single item in this mess, and read all of them to the detriment of my strict no-Jesus related media diet. And it's honestly pretty good. It subverted my expectations quite a bit. I didn't tag the chapters as spoilers because it's a Souls-like. It's hard to get what the plot is doing even if you get it spoon-fed, and let's be real, you won't be sitting around reading notes in this weird font they have going. But I don't want to be called out either, so here's your token spoiler warning, and I'll catch you here for some conclusions. Now, don't get me wrong, Blasphemous isn't just Souls-like, it's straight up Dark Souls. You wake up in a pile of your dead peers because God decided you can't die anymore. Union rules. The world is fucked and getting fuckier. Doing an NPC's questline means they die horrifically. Even the ending is you replacing Gwyn on the throne, so no, not original, but still interesting. On your adventure, you find out in Albero that it's essentially the last bastion of humanity, and even there, alive people aren't exactly common, but why? Let's take a look at the miracle. There's plenty of NPCs that you can find around, not to mention items with flavor text. These are all mostly riddles, but you can kind of piece together a semblance of an MO. From a pile of dead bodies, you were the only one to rise up. This woman, wanting to repent with pain in her chest, got a handful. This other one got tired of creepy perverts, so she burned her own face, and the miracle took it personally. Still don't know why she shoots purple lasers out of her hands, though. That's a mystery. These guys were worshipping false idols, so they were turned to salt. This one guy was burnt on the stake for being a heretic, so let's bring him back and give him superpowers. You can see where I'm going with this. It's all very random. The miracle doesn't really act on any form of logic that a human can understand. It's essentially just a collection of arbitrary events. Even time itself outside of Albero doesn't flow naturally. You can see the miracle as a sort of entropy system, manifesting appropriate punishment for some actions while disproportionately rewarding others in a vague attempt at balance. But even that might be a bit too organized. What is clear though is that for the inherent arbitrary nature of these actions, humanity sure didn't flourish. The first manifestation of the miracle was when the Twisted One, wanting to repent for his guilt, sat on a wooden log for days as it twisted and contorted around his body, eventually fusing with it and becoming a tree. You can see this as a representation of the cycle of life, the birth of this tree being also the birth of real manifestations of the miracle, but it's also a cycle of what you feed it. Maybe delivering wanted punishment for guilt as its first action twisted the miracle into this dealer of penance. This world wanted to suffer for its sins, so it obliged. But wanting to be punished for sin is already a very weird and counterintuitive solution to an arguably inexistent problem. People are confused, inside and out. The Twisted One wanted the punishment and accepted it without complaint, but some people might say one thing and think another. For example, this guy recognizes he must have done something to deserve this. But why this? What does it mean? So maybe it's not as random as it appears, maybe it's acting on the inner self, and who knows what could be in these people's heads. The church, though, already had plenty of power from before these events, Custodia being a very spiritual land, so in typical believer fashion, they stuck to their guns and continued worshipping their own deities and didn't fold to this new chaotic overlord. Nah, They positioned themselves as the sole, God-ordained interpreters of the miracle's divine will, and they started branding random people as heretics. A woman named Tentudia was born with thorn-like hair and abandoned by her mother at the doorsteps of a convent. This similarity to the Twisted One, or the Father, how he came to be known as the messenger of the divine, was enough for her to be branded a heretic and murdered, parts of her hair being scattered around Custodia, so she never gets to be laid to rest. But we've established that the miracle either operates arbitrarily or based on people's innermost thoughts, so with no one understanding rhyme or reason for any of these punishments, it was very easy for the church to just continue enforcing whatever actions they deemed helped their position of power. This woman wished to bring all her people's suffering upon herself, something you hear people say in real life. It didn't go so well. This fucker is just sitting there, celebrating it. If you help her find peace, one way or another, and don't go the extra mile to give him some other meaning in life, he fucking kills himself. He's so upset at the idea of ending the endless pain of another human being that he throws himself off a cliff. Riveting. So, the church encourages all these forms of adulterated worship, but in typical real-life fashion, it also profits from it. You can see this in the stark contrast between outside and inside of the church's walls. Couldn't they be using all that gold to put on their faces or something instead? What sealed the deal for me with the story are the anti-religious themes that this game doesn't really make subtle.
1,000 prayers do not clarify whether or not the grievous miracle is a manifestation of true holiness.
I was expecting way more of a cut and dry, your way of religion is wrong and my religion is right, but it's vastly smarter than that. It might not be all religion and just Spanish Catholicism, or maybe not even religion in general, but just their institutions that can become corrupted and misguided, enforcing pointless random suffering, not for the good of the people, but to line their pockets and keep power. At the end of the day, what's the point in all this suffering? It's really selfish if you think about it. The guilt is there for immoral things someone's done. How are you helping the situation by just feeling pain for it? The physical pain is also sometimes preferable to the mental anguish. You should use that energy to go out and correct your wrongs instead, like the penitent one. He's doing something about it, and don't worry, the process is gonna bring plenty of pain with it. So no, not a full-on condemnation of all religion, and I know I'm right, mostly because of ending A. And don't worry, it's pretty obvious and straightforward to get there. I mean, Dio gives you this thorn at the beginning of the game and literally tells you what you must do.
A wise penitent like me knows nothing of what lies beyond those high walls.
Gotcha. You have to find this bead. It doesn't do anything, but we're smart dudes, so we already know that we have to equip it and die 3 times. As you die, it gets more corrupted and changes from pure white to black and putrid, so you know it's working. But on the 3rd death, it's complete, and it's the strongest upgrade in the game now. So the path is clear. We have to go to these statues now. They're really useful. You can pay them next to nothing to clear your fervor lock, so you have to be very careful and not... So you go in here, I mean obviously, you kill the baddies, and look, the thorn is blossoming. Now you do that 7 more times in these hidden rooms that you need relics to even get to, and then you can go beat the final boss and get the good ending. Not sure why I even have this in here. I'm sure most people just do it naturally without even thinking about it. Even the last boss is such a pompous ass, calling you a filthy sinner that is not even worthy of crossing blades with his golden sword. Go fuck yourself, Red Skull. All the immunity on the planet can't save you if you just sit there. So now you climb the dust and sit on the throne, and you essentially become an alternative object of worship. So all we did was just replace one religion with another, but this one that we've created is just an idol. There's no words, no teachings, no actions. It's people gathering together in prayer, community, shared goals. This is what a religion can bring that's useful to society. Not opulence and enforcement of pointless suffering and punishment for misguided guilt.
Faceless warrior, stay thy course. I sense... You're a vampire!
You know the drill. If you like the game, then here's more of it. It's also free, so you have no excuse. But you do, this time. First of all, the DLC bosses are harder, and in some other game, that would have been objectively just good, but here with the combat mechanics, it's a mixed bag. I usually don't get into the DLC, and I won't here either, but there is one that has to be mentioned. The Wounds of Eventide DLC added the true ending of Truth and Wisdom. Wait, you mean I've been doing cryptic shit and standing in rooms with everything unequipped for 20 seconds to open hidden doors and the plot wasn't even complete on release? Yes. It gets even better. There's some more steps that you can definitely 100% logically and organically piece together on top of your ending A journey to reach it, and you also get the third phase on your literally 80% invulnerable final boss that you can't attack unless the platforms allow it. Enjoy. I've already made the dad analogy, but it's once again exceedingly accurate. The 20 or so hours it took me to 100% the base game, and even more after the DLC, were around how much it took for me to mellow out on the concept. It's difficult for me to end up recommending a game with this severe of a problem with the core gameplay loop, but it is Dark Souls. It's not meant to be for everybody. However, considering the indie nature of the game and the relatively inexperienced studio, this is an amazing looking game with an intricate and subversive story, albeit hampered by the massive cryptic wall standing between it and the player, and some very memorable enemy and boss designs, even if not necessarily fun to fight. Important elements of the gameplay though are so poorly implemented and have such a lack of polish that I can see people excited by the world just dropping it before they can have a proper taste of it. It has a conceptual misunderstanding of why Dark Souls gameplay is hard but rewarding, and is a very stripped down Metroidvania experience. If you've not been fully convinced by what I've had to show, then I would point you to any of these other titles before this instead, and then maybe come back if you just want more. It has its place, just not at the top. Next time, we're gonna fly some Zeppelins and get copyright struck over one of the best OSTs in gaming history, and with that, I'll see you next time.